Alright, it's 9:20. Means it's 4:20 somewhere. If you got one, spark up. Alright, we are finally here. Part 24. When will Jesus bring the pork chops? It's gonna be the last, 21 minutes and some change. Be sure I have the other 23 parts all in a playlist. Be sure to check those out. And let's get to it.
I don't think there's really such a thing as morality. I think it's a human construct designed to facilitate the control of people. Values, ethics, legal standards, all of these things are human generated, and they're lumped under some vague idea called morality. But suppose humans got it wrong. Suppose there's no actual objective morality. Suppose there's just a natural, worldly, secular, common-sense standard of behavior whose purpose is what's best for getting along and what's best for survival. That would be a good system. Why should a system like that be overlaid with a sense of spooky, mystical, judgmental oversight? When this Catholic guy, Cardinal Bernardin of Chicago, died, they praised him for accepting death gracefully. Excuse me, but isn't that what you're supposed to do? Accept death gracefully? What's that? You say many people don't accept death gracefully? I see. So now we're evaluating people's behavior and praising them based on what other people don't do. Wonderful. I don't think people should ever get credit for doing something they're supposed to do, even if it's rarely done by others. Condemn the ones who don't do it if you like, but don't praise the ones who do it. Only one of the two behaviors is worth commenting on, not both.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. I'd be like praising myself for not robbing someone today, you know? Hey, I didn't rob anybody today or yesterday. That is a reward. No. But
You know those broken white lines that separate the lanes on a highway? Have you ever counted them? If you do, you'll find that there are 100 of them every mile. It's true. Each line is 100th of a mile from the next one. Count them for yourself as you track your distance on the odometer. Just count how many there are each 10th of a mile. There should be 10. But while you're counting, don't forget to keep an eye out for that big 18-wheeler up ahead parked sideways in the middle of the road.
so funny story. Well, not really funny, but kind of ties in with that. On the one of the freeways around here on Saturday morning, a truck carrying a prefabricated home lost the home. So imagine, nice rainy day, cruising down the freeway. There's just a house chilling in the middle of the freeway. That shit had the freeways backed up for even like, because this was on the 205. So going from Vancouver to Portland, there's two bridges. There's the 205 and the I-5, and they're kind of, good ways apart. They're a good 8 miles apart, But man, fucked both bridges.
Hi, I'm Ferris Banderhead, another bothersome movie star who tells people to support some charity or other in order to make myself appear concerned and to increase my popularity. Not to mention easing the guilt I feel for having much more than I deserve. But enough about me. April is National Hunger Month. In Beverly Hills, we're having our annual hunger banquet and gala called Hors d'oeuvres for Ethiopia. Send in your dollars today and help us feed people around the world who could certainly use a nice hors d'oeuvre. And remember, the sooner we conquer hunger, the sooner we can start working on upset stomach. Thank you. This is Ferris Banderhead reminding you to see my new spy movie, The Snotlocker Papers.
So, he talks about tackling hunger around the world. The UN estimates it would cost $33 billion to end world hunger. We spend over $800 billion to bomb people. I'm no mathematician, but I feel like we could cut our our war budget, 75%. There, like I was saying, we'd still have a solid little over $200 billion budget, which is still more than every other country in the world spends. However, we'd have a lot more security. Because if we're feeding the world, who in their right mind is going to come and attack us? Like, nobody in their right mind is going to sit there and be like, just because they're governor or whoever, their president, dictator, you need to go attack them. What the fuck, they feed my family. What the fuck I look like going and attacking them, The old rule. Never, dog won't bite the hand that feeds it. Well, not always true, but, that's the old rule. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. And then, and we could even take that $33 billion from that remaining, and we still have like $600 billion that either, the working people can keep, not having it taken from them, or, fixing shit that needs to be fixed. A whole lot of our tax dollars went to building up Afghanistan, while we have cities here falling apart. Not even just cities, small towns falling apart. It's a mess. There's some shit that needs to be done. But hey, when it's left up to government to take care of it, don't expect it to get done unless the right people can make a buck off it.
I'm Dr. Mannheim of the Mannheim Rehab and Recovery Center. People ask me, how can I tell when one of my loved ones needs help with a substance abuse problem? And I say, if you see them lying in a corner, naked, in a puddle of their own filth, it may be time to think about counseling. Call Mannheim today, and we'll come over and pick them up. But before we get there, please clean up the filth. Uncle Blitzen was a troubled man. As a child visiting backstage at a concert, he was fondled by a viola player and lived the rest of his days with an unnatural fear of stringed instruments. He was one of the 900 people present at the Jonestown massacre, but he threw away the Kool-Aid and only pretended to be dead. When everyone stopped moving, he looted the corpses. Subsequently, he moved to Stockholm, where he became the town scumbag. Years later, he re-emerged in England as a self-proclaimed bishop, roaming the Midlands with a band of rogue altar boys, administering forced communion to lapsed Catholics. He died during Hurricane Shlomo, in front of an adult sex shop, when the store's sign blew down and he was crushed to death by a giant neon dildo. Uncle Pinocchio had 23 separate and distinct personalities. Unfortunately, all of them were unpleasant. He believed that Porky Pig cartoons represented actual events, and he once stabbed his dog with a ceremonial Japanese saber in a dispute over a lamb bone. He always wore a three-piece suit. It didn't have a vest. The jacket was just torn in half. He drifted from job to job, balloon vendor, freelance daredevil, and stoop laborer among them. He finally settled in his basement, where he lost his mind trying to invent a rectal harmonica. After that, the family kept him tied to a linden tree in the backyard, where they fed him with a slingshot. After 6 years, they released him on Mussolini's birthday, whereupon he married a passive-aggressive librarian who later beat him to death with a dictionary stand. Uncle Shadrach felt he was special because one of his testicles was shaped like a Brazil nut and the other like a cashew. He loved to run up to women screaming, "You want some mixed nuts?" He told me that in his younger days he was quite a lover and once fucked a girl so hard her freckles came off. Alas, he didn't marry well. His wife, Chlorine, looked like something that might be found in the dumpster behind a cloning center. Her PMS was so bad she had a mood swing installed in her backyard. As a child, while watching a gay pride parade, she was run over by a float full of lesbians and was eventually found dead in a military barracks, having ingested a load of bad sperm. Shadrach was electrocuted by a Radio Shack pacemaker he purchased at a thrift shop. Uncle Shemp was alarmingly unexceptional. He had no detectable lifestyle, and his only accomplishment was the fact that he was a lifelong member of the general public. He started slowly, struggled hard, and eventually clawed his way to the back of the pack. Occasionally, he would show a sudden flash of mediocrity, but quickly return to his usual pattern of complete insignificance. He was a man with no memories. He didn't have amnesia. He simply had no memories. As he put it, nothing big ever really happened. As a result, he wore a medic alert bracelet saying, "Please let me die." His only pleasure was his hobby, picking through airline wreckage looking for children's toys. He died at 75 from a head injury suffered as the result of undue glee.
Yeah. How does he, where does this even come from?
Following a bowel movement. Tumor Humor. Guys, Gals, and Cancer. Women. The Produce Department. I see where Ruthie Garrick went under the knife the other day. She had a tumor on her the size of a grapefruit.
Well, that's bigger than Estelle Mealy's tumor. Estelle's was the size of a large navel orange.
Yeah, but sometimes a large navel orange can be almost as big as a grapefruit. That's true, especially one of them small Indian River grapefruits. I don't like them. Too sour. Me either. Listen, girls, this wasn't no small Indian River-sized tumor. The doctor said this thing was almost the size of a cantaloupe. He claimed if he'd left it in any longer, it probably would have wound up as big as a cassava melon.
Earlene Miller had a tumor the size of a cassava melon. Actually, her sister claimed it was approaching honeydew proportions.
Well, I don't know nothing about no tumors, but when my Aunt Ruby died, her liver was the size of a champion watermelon. I got a picture of it somewhere. Really? You know, they say that after you die, your liver keeps right on growing. Well, I'm thinking Ruby's liver had probably reached its limit. I mean, where do you go from watermelon? Beach ball? Kate, a beach ball's not...
Sorry. It's acting weird.
Probably reached its limit. I mean, where do you go from watermelon? Beach ball? Kate, a beach ball's not a food. You want food? I'll give you food. Well, you hear this. 10 years ago, when my sister Myra had her gallbladder out, they found 20 gallstones in it. Each one of them was the size and the shape of a different type of food. A raisin, a pea, a caper, a grape, a radish, an olive, a pearl onion, a melon ball, a hazelnut, a marshmallow, a Brussels sprout, a Bing cherry, a kumquat, a gherkin, a filbert, a small whole-boiled potato, a cocktail sausage, a meatball, a lima bean, and a dwarf pumpkin. They took all that out of your aunt? They sure did. Jesus, did she feel any better? She said she was hungry. Tumor Humor. Guys, Gals, and Cancer. Men. The Sports Section. I see where Petey Whalen died the other day. They say he had a tumor on him the size of a beach ball.
No kidding? That one under his arm? Jesus, it must have grown fast.
It sure did. I can remember the day I first saw it. It was small, like a marble. Then almost overnight it looked like a golf ball. I couldn't believe it. That was the day he showed it to me. By the time I saw it, it looked like a slightly enlarged handball, maybe just approaching racquetball size. I spent about an hour with him, and as I was leaving, I glanced at it. The damn thing looked like a tennis ball. I don't mean it had fuzz on it or anything. I just mean it was the size of a tennis ball. Yeah, that's when he went to the hospital. He said on the way over in the taxi, it went from a baseball to a softball, and then in the waiting room it reached the size of a small regulation volleyball. Finally, when he got into the examining room, the doctors were so alarmed at its growth, they smashed it with a big frying pan, and it temporarily flattened out into an oval shape.
I remember that. For about an hour it resembled a football.
Yeah, then it slowly became round again, but it kept on getting bigger. Suddenly it developed big black spots all over it.
The soccer ball stage.
Yeah, of course by that time the situation was hopeless. Pretty soon the thing was up to the size of a basketball, and before you knew it, it had gone right past medicine ball and was heading for beach ball status. They finally had to move him out of his room and put him in the gymnasium.
Appropriate. How did he die anyway?
They tried to operate on him, but as soon as they made an incision, all the air rushed out of him. Death by deflation. Poor guy.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what we forgot? Lacrosse and polo.
One of my pet pursuits is keeping track of how the news media describe those things in the news that increase or decrease. I can generally rely on the fact that the same verbs will be used repeatedly in the same situations. One of the first things I noticed is that while certain things skyrocket, other things tend to mushroom. Medical costs skyrocket. The national debt doesn't do that. It mushrooms. And experts warn if present trends continue, both of these things will eventually go through the roof. But mushrooming is not the only thing the national debt does. It also balloons. There aren't too many things that balloon. The annual budget deficit used to balloon, then for a while it didn't balloon, now it balloons again. And by the way, people can balloon as well. I remember reading in the tabloids once that the actress Delta Burke had ballooned to some weight that apparently the publication found unacceptable. So, thus far, we've skyrocketed, mushroomed, and ballooned. But let's not forget snowballing. You know what snowballs? An investigation. What happens is, an inquiry becomes an investigation, and the investigation begins to snowball. And what does it snowball into? Right, a full-blown probe. And if the probe uncovers enough dirt, it could possibly mushroom into a full-blown scandal. Then we have the case of swelled. During the 1990s, job roles swelled. By the way, I've often wondered if those job roles are at all similar to the welfare roles we used to hear so much.
This almost reminds me of when he did the correspondence dinner. That was fun. He ripped all of them. It was
About. Just between you and me, I've never actually seen welfare rolls, but I'm sure that with a little margarine or jelly, they're quite delicious. And it's certainly heartening to see the food stamp program working so effectively. Getting back to our subject here, I've found that one of the best places to keep an eye on these up and down words is Wall Street, financial reporting. For purposes of this activity, I'll use hypothetical examples of economic activity that don't actually reflect recent conditions. I can't keep adjusting this material according to the whims of the economy. And besides, this is about language, not finance. Just to review, we've already skyrocketed, mushroomed, ballooned, snowballed, and swelled. Now, as we enter the world of Wall Street, we add a few simpler verbs: climb, surge, and jump. The stock market climbed today as prices surged on news that housing starts had jumped 10%. Lots of action. Another big thing on Wall Street is soaring. Stock prices soared today as reports showed earnings were up sharply. Or they may have shot upward. At any rate, upward is good.
I remember one time hearing Lou Dobbs himself telling me that the Dow Jones Industrials had vaulted upward 200 points. And on the same day, not to be left too far behind, the long bond inched higher. Then we have the very special case of spiraling. The nice thing about spiraling is that it can go in either direction. As medical costs have spiraled upward, the quality of medical care has spiraled downward. And not only do these two medical numbers spiral upward and downward, both of them are actually capable of spiraling out of control. Spiraling downward brings us to the verbs for things that are falling. For some reason, downward verbs are more colorful than upward verbs. Downward is where we discover plunge, plummet, and nosedive. You can always tell when a bull market is over, because housing starts plunge, new car sales plummet, and orders for durable goods take a nosedive. At a time like that, stock prices are usually on the verge of collapse. Or, instead of collapsing, they may simply tumble, drop sharply, or go into a tailspin.
Except for the way we have the system set up since the 2008 bailout. Yeah. What was it? $1 trillion a week was pumped to the banks to keep them afloat in the first few months of COVID. Jesus, I'm getting a new camera this weekend. Shit's getting annoying.
And if stock prices are in a tailspin, you can be sure it won't be long before they find themselves in a dizzying free fall. Continuing with bear markets, not all days are so dramatic. Occasionally, prices only dip slightly. Dip slightly is the opposite of edge higher. And before we leave these words for increasing and decreasing, I would like to make special mention of beefed up. I remember reading once that in anticipation of a visit by Yasser Arafat, security at the United Nations had been beefed up. Arafat being a Muslim, of course, beef would have been the preferred meat. You certainly wouldn't want security to be porked up. I can think of any number of reasons why we wouldn't want that. And by the way, if you've ever seen some of these security people, you know that the last thing they need is more pork, or beef, or food of any kind for that matter. Beefed up is one of those terms that has no exact opposite. Nothing ever gets beefed down. They never say, now that Arafat's visit has been concluded, security at the United Nations has been beefed down. Doesn't sound right. Instead, they say scaled back. Always remember, anything that's been beefed up can be scaled back. Although occasionally, for variety's sake, rather than scaled back, the item may be pared down. Hiked and trimmed are two more...
I wish they'd scale back the Patriot Act.
Good up and down examples. Quite often, during the same session of Congress, defense spending will be hiked, while education spending is trimmed. And sometimes, if Congress is in a really bad mood, education spending is slashed and defense spending skyrockets. Well, we've gone from sky high to rock bottom, and we seem to be winding down now. So let me add one last item. I think I may have finally figured out the difference between ramping up and ratcheting up. I'm pretty sure that while ramping up takes place on a continuum, ratcheting up is more a series of increments. But I do find it interesting that, as with the beef situation, I rarely hear of ramping or ratcheting down. As for me, I'm at wit's end. As you know, people no longer have problems in this country. They have issues. This shift grows out of our increasingly desperate need to shade the truth and see things as more positive than they really are. Problems sound negative and ordinary. Issues sound important, worthy of attention. People are proud to announce them. I have issues. They feel superior to others who haven't made the switch. Poor fuck. He has problems. I have issues. To feel extra superior, they may even pair it with some other trendy upgrade. He has a drug problem. I have chemical dependency issues. As with everything in American culture, the use of the word spread indiscriminately to the point where it, of course, lost all its usefulness. During the murder case in San Francisco in 2001, in which 2 dogs mauled a woman to death, one of the neighbors said, "Everyone knew those dogs had issues with females." Commercials picked it up. L'Oreal says mature skin has issues all its own. An adult diaper commercial informs me that many women have bladder control issues. So now people have all these issues. Trust issues, boundary issues, abandonment issues, personal space issues. Clearly, I have a problem with this word. But problem has lost its power, cheapened by the careless use of expressions like, "What's your problem? You got a problem with that?" No problem. And for those truly in a hurry, no prob. I needed a new word, and I refused to say issues. So, instead, I turned to that ultimate source of creative language bending, our nation's capital. I heard a prominent senator, when asked if some issue presented a problem for him, say, "Well, it's not a problem, but it is a concern." And I thought, wow, another choice for people who refuse to acknowledge problems. I adopted it immediately, but I hope concern doesn't catch on to the point where it becomes a problem. After all this trouble, I'd hate to have to deal with concern issues.
That it. All right. Just under 7.5 hours in. I was, yeah, 24 segments. I enjoyed every one. Like I said, if you're new, be sure to check out the playlist where I did the other 23 segments. I broke it down into roughly 20-minute segments. There's a few shorter ones. Now that I finished this one, after I had did the last Eddie Griffin reaction, I discovered a stand-up he had recently done in New York. That one's only 40 minutes, but I'm going to probably break that up into 2 segments. That'll be my next segmented comedy one. So keep an eye out for that.